Hey, Blue Table fans. Yes, it's me again. Does this seem crooked a little bit? Hold on, let me see if I can fix this. You go sideways a little bit. All right, guys. Ah, that looks better. Wow, is that an illusion? All right, so I went on my Facebook page, and I have two. I have my personal page, and then I have Blue Table Painting. So, all right, here we go. Oh boy. So I asked on there to suggest topics to talk about, and away we go. First off, Derek B asks, choosing color palettes. Well, it's more of a statement, really. So basically, in a lot of painting lines, they have triads of paints, like a dark, a medium, and a light. And Blue Table Painting has a much evolved list of Vallejo paints. It's about 50 of them that we put in the kits for our artists. And the reason we like to use the same paints for every single artist over 20 years is so that paint jobs will match. So when you see the pictures, you can tell, oh, this is Hull Red, this is Gory Red, this is True Red. And so when choosing a color palette, go in threes. And also look at off colors. So don't be like, oh, well, I'm going to make this green and red. You'll want it to be park green and brick red. So make one slightly lighter and one slightly darker. And also, I recommend experimenting with unusual colors that are off the beaten track, like, for example, Vallejo's Cayman Green, which is a really dark military brownish green, or Verdigris, which is obviously a very, very, very light bluish green. And just keep experimenting until you find your favorites, and then there's your paint kit. Definitely, I don't imagine myself ever going with a standard pre-done paint kit where they just give you 24 colors. Usually those aren't going to work out. Okay, David J says, your real opinion about 3D printing in the current state of Games Workshop pricing structures. Do you remember dot matrix printers? When I was 13, I wrote my own role-playing game, by the way, and I wrote it on a dot matrix printer. And in the introduction, oh man, here's this 13-year-old going, Dungeons & Dragons is no good, it doesn't make any sense, I'm making my own system. And there you have my entire life in a nutshell. By the way, for a long time I was drinking water out of glasses. I drink about a gallon of water a day, which is, as you may know, that's a very healthy amount of water. I don't force myself to do it either. I love water. I usually don't drink soda or juice, and I drank water out of glasses for a long time until this last week when my lovely wife said, hey, doesn't it taste funny and smell funny in that glass? And I noticed, I'm like, oh, now I notice it. Oh no, now I can't have water in a glass anymore. So I have this thing now, which I co-opted from her. Yes, that's right. Unintended consequences, baby. It's so much better. I gotta get one of my own, though. That's all there is to it. Okay, that's what 3D printing is. Right now, 3D printing is in the dot matrix printer stage. And the fact is, I think people will have home 3D printers, but it won't be as much as you would think. Like Kinko's still exists. You still go to a place to get regular printing done, and I think 3D printing will be like that. Color 3D printing is something that makes me worry for my industry, but on the other hand, maybe not so much, because games like AT-43, they just died off, and wretchedly I might add, and the reason for that is prestige, that acquiring, assembling, and painting an army is a difficult act. So that's why I think that in major tournaments or in certain gaming groups, they don't like you to 3D print your models because it cheapens the process. And so I think there's going to be sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for, elitism to miniatures battles. And that's why I think Games Workshop is going to continue to do well. Pricing structure, listen, it's never-ending complaining about the prices. And it's not just Games Workshop products, it's everything. And it's something that I personally don't like. And I like to watch myself for the same things that maybe I don't like seeing in others. By the way, no offense, David J. I don't think you're complaining about it. I just think you brought it up and asked me what I think. So the first thing that comes to mind is obviously people complain a lot about the prices of Games Workshop products. So anyway, and it's the same for anything. There's always price complaining. I don't care for it. I think it's scarcity mentality. I think it shuts down avenues. Like the mind can shut down its perceptions when it gets stuck in a rut or wants to perceive things in a negative way. Anyway, I didn't express that very well. So anyway, yeah, I wish it were less expensive. But you know what? There's competition. There's plenty of other great games that are less expensive out there. And for whatever reason, I think Games Workshop is doing a good job. I think there is a thing where men like things that are difficult to do. Like if a golf course opened and they were like, hey, our holes are 10 feet around, so it's really easy to get the ball in, they would get no business. It's interesting because it's difficult. And so, like miniature golf versus regular golf, I guess would be another great example of that. So I think that Games Workshop games are kind of like that. There's a difficulty level to them and an expense to them, and I think that's really kind of what drives it. Well, there's my opinion. In terms of real opinion about 3D printing, I love it. I can't get enough of it. I'm really stoked. I absolutely have no problem with 3D printing models. And if a guy had a different idea and he did it less expensively and wanted to paint it up, awesome. I would definitely allow that at my tournament as long as everything was obvious what it was. Jimmy S. writes, Plastic Forge World, maybe your assembly team would want to talk about the new plastic kits. There's no assembly team at Blue Table Painting. This is a very small operation. I have like 1 or 2 regular guys and they do all the assembly. I also look for painters who can also do assembly, and then they just do everything from start to finish. So assembly team there is not. And I've thought a lot about it over recent years because I know how to expand the company out again and make it into a larger operations. But every time I'm like, I don't think that's where I'm finding meaning now. I read a book early on in like 2008 when Blue Table Painting was very much starting to really expand, and it was called Small Giants. And basically the book was about companies that they weren't very big, and they had the opportunity to expand and become monoliths, but they chose to remain very small and to be meaningful. And that's definitely what I've done. But anyway, Jimmy S., thank you for your question. I love Plastic Forge World. I think that's definitely the direction that they'll go. Like Games Workshop, I think if they had unlimited funds, like if all of a sudden, $4 billion just landed out of the sky and they could do it, well, they would just change everything over to plastic. There would be no resin. Personally, I don't think, I'd much rather work with a plastic kit than a resin kit in every single way. And the only reason resin is around is because it's very accessible, and Games Workshop, in the case of Games Workshop, they have not been able to transfer everything over to plastics yet. Part of me was a little disappointed because they didn't do all the Eldar kits change them all into plastics. But they changed a lot of them. So for this wave, they made a lot of progress. But some of those aspect warriors are like, I think they're like 20-year-old casts, and they are not casts, 20-year-old sculpts, and they're not the awesomest. But, you know, there you go. Forrest, so thank you very much for your question. Forrest L says, Warhammer Fantasy. Well, I guess I didn't ask for questions. I did ask for topics. I love Warhammer Fantasy. I played it during the Golden Age in the 90s. And frankly, if I had a choice to play, like you can have Warhammer Fantasy or you can have Age of Sigmar forever, I would definitely choose Age of Sigmar just for the models. However, I do really miss the rules set. The pageantry of it and the strategy of it, of like moving these blocks around, and if you were a 1/4 inch off or an 1/8 of an inch shy for a charge, well, guess what? That could be disaster. Like, you had to really be a great tactician to play Warhammer Fantasy. So I'll be glad when they bring that back. I hope they bring back the essence of the game, the fun of that game. I mean, every die roll in Warhammer Fantasy is a real nail biter. However, what I don't miss is, I do believe it was 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy, where they started making giant blocks, like 50 or 100 guys. It would just move in a big rectangle. Oh, that was, I just simply could not do that. And if they bring that back, I think the game will definitely fail. Okay. Johnny H says, how do you play Warhammer competitively or for fun, and how? All right, so here's the deal. I don't play Warhammer, and here's why. Because I play it for fun. And frankly, kind of how the game goes now is, it's not for fun. Even if you have a casual group, because of net listing, which is going on the internet and finding the best army list that kind of beats out the other ones, they, you know, you can't have a fun game anymore with matched play. You can with narrative play, but if I'm going to do narrative play, I'll just go play Dungeons and Dragons. And that is the answer to this topic, is that I play miniatures battles, but in the form of my Dungeons and Dragons in-person game with miniatures, which I love. If you're friends with me on Facebook, and you can be, you can see little snippets about my game. I'm also on Instagram too. I changed my Instagram address, but I haven't updated it on my YouTube thing, so the liner notes one won't be correct. So maybe I should do that now. All right, Mark W. Okay, so that's it. I am, however, taking another crack at match play for Warhammer 40k. I'll be doing it mostly with my sons, but I also have male friends who I play 40k with. And but I sold off my Necrons. I took a real run at competitive play. It was just like a fish out of water with that stuff. And but I do plan on taking another run at it. I did have to sell my Necrons army. It's heartbreaking. Every time I think about it, I'm like, oh, Sean, why did you do that? It's so hard to build a massive 4,000 or 5,000 point army. And I painted a lot of it myself, converted a lot of it myself. And I'm just like, oh, Sean. And I had a Tzeentch Demons army, and I just sold that without even playing it one time. That's just heartbreaking. So my goal, as always, is to never sell my armies. Now, what else? Oh, so I'm going to be starting an Eldar army. Eldar and Imperial Guard, I think, is the way that I'm going to go. And the thing is, the Imperial Guard can be used for the science fiction role-playing games that I'm running. And I would love to get on Etsy and get some 3D printed figures for an army like that. Okay, Mark W. Tips on raising children to be good humans. Yes, okay. Well, I'm a father of 5, and I think my children are pretty awesome. Self-determination. I think that the ultimate thing that a human can have and be is it has to do with self-determination, to be able to choose who you are, how you want to express yourself, and to be able to create your own individuality, to create your own self. And I've certainly done it and not gone with what was expected of me. And it's gone very well. And I think the world is better off with free thinkers and free spirits. On the other hand, there have to be some hard limits. And as a father, really, ultimately, it's your job to set those barriers and say, yeah, actually you can't do this. And my barriers are pretty far out. My children live with some very broad fences. So, for example, to not become addicted to drugs, teenage pregnancy is right out. What are the other things? They're not really coming to mind offhand, but stuff like that. Smoking, and I have to say, there's certain things that are like really harmful. But like dressing, if one of my kids goes through like a goth phase or whatever, that doesn't bother me. And I actually think it's counterproductive to put on a lot of limits on a child and to let my own personal preferences sort of dictate, be like, well, you just can't do that. And so I guess to answer your question, I'd say the top thing is default answer of yes. So my kids, my answer is yes, unless there's a specific reason why they should not be doing that. And I found a lot of times, my instinct was to be like, no, we can't do that, let's not do that. And I'm like, no, Sean, stop. This is important to them and it's important to me. And I guess that would be a rule number 2. And my kids are very familiar with this saying. I stop myself, I say, it's important to you, it's important to me. And so letting them self-express, kind of work through these things, because if you clamp down, you're pulling back a bowstring, you're creating this counter tension that eventually is going to whip back in your face in ways that you do not expect it to. So counterintuitive. Their mother, as you know, I have 4 kids from my first wife, and we're divorced now, but we still get along very well. We are co-parents, so we meet often. We talk about what's going on with the kids. We come up with policies or approaches or whatever, like how we're going to handle things, and that way we both have the exact same answer. And I guess if I were to add a third item for raising good kids, it would be raising good children to be good humans. It would be mother knows best. And I probably not everybody's going to agree. There's going to be some false logic there, like, well, but what about this? Well, yeah, there's always counter examples. In general, though, I would say it's the mom who has the best intuition. So in default scenarios, I will more than happily just go along with what their mom is doing, and not because I don't care or I'm a weak figure, but because I trust her intuition in a lot of things. So when we're talking about it, it would be, we would talk it through. I want my perspective to be heard and be given weight, but if it comes down to it, I'd say I would just go with and just support her in what she's doing. Don't undermine the mom. And that is hugely important. Sometimes ego can get in there, and then it's like nothing good comes of an ununited front. And that's a big thing. So keep the arguments about things private. So like their mother and I, we will go, and they won't be even around when we're having these discussions. And we figure out what the policy is going to be, and then that way they understand that we both think the same way. And sometimes, well, maybe I don't think that way, but guess what? I'm going along, and it gets to a deeper truth, which is I really do respect their mother. I really do trust her intuition. So there you go. I guess that's I guess I have a lot to say on that topic. It's really good. And if a mother who feels genuinely supported, that is really a very powerful thing. And because, she did go to the valley of pain, death, shadow, and fear to retrieve that human soul and bring it into the earth. All right. Dexter K suggests the topic, how to prepare and run a sandbox world as a DM without losing your mind or your players losing the thread. You know what? I want to make a separate video about this. I'm going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. But, I'll just give you some short tips right here. Coming up on 20 minutes. Max is 30 for this one. So good. I love water so much, guys. Okay, a sandbox, for those of you who don't know, is a non-linear adventure where you create a world where the players could just go anywhere. And by the way, if you try and do this with miniatures and terrain, oh man, super hard. But I'm up for it. My goal is to have a world room with lots of shelving and space for miniatures on display, where I could quite literally just do that. Just be like, we're going to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to set up the next set of encounter areas, and I'll have all miniatures and all terrain, and I'll be ready to go. Okay, so here's the deal with the sandbox world is you have to have a lot of preparation ahead of time. I guess that's what he means without losing your mind. But there's really no way around it. You just have to have a lot of things just ready to go. So what I do is so first off, I create a giant list of non-player characters. And it could be just an idea, a name and an idea. I definitely have a thing full of names. And you can plug those guys in as you go along, wherever they're needed. And so that's one way to do it, is that the sandbox isn't a giant sandbox. It's actually like a quantum sandbox where things can, well, maybe this dwarf, wandering dwarf warrior, well, he could appear here rather than here. But once you do set that up, you have to have notes in front of you. You have to have a pad and paper, and you have to write down really quick where those things are. And then right after the session, you've got to have a giant spreadsheet, and you have to put things so you remember where they're supposed to be, and you can refer back to those notes. So that's one way, is to have a whole bunch of people to inhabit it, but they don't have to be very detailed. You can add things as you go along. There's supplements that have tons of NPCs, and then you could literally just roll a D100 and be like, okay, you know, this person appears here. The second thing is, and this is the most important, is planting seeds that you can blow up into full blown other things later on. So for example, in your session 1, you've got to have different elements appear, and they can have payoffs later on. So for example, in my session 1, I would typically have a friendly person show up and just introduce themselves, maybe say that they're a fan. Later, you could use that as any number of things. It could be an assassin. It could be that they had killed somebody and that was a relative of theirs. Or it could be an admirer, or it could just be somebody you want to develop later on. And then do a shadowy figure, like somebody that's watching them, and if they chase them down, that person gets away. Or maybe they catch them, and you just give an appearance, or they activate an amulet, and it turns them into black goo, and it's like, oh, what the heck was that? So plant some mysterious little seeds. I love to have a box that can't be opened, like a box that has like a missing key, and whatever they try, they just can't do it. And eventually they kind of like raccoons, they just sort of give up and leave it alone. But then later, oh, they find a jade key. It's like, wait, maybe this opens the box. Stuff like that. And then you could have a portal that can't be opened, and a mysterious benefactor. I mean, any sort of that thing, you should have maybe, I'd say 6 to 12 of those things just in the first session, where they're talking to different people and they're moving around. So, and generally I do sandbox non-linear games. Most of the time though, at the end of a session, I ask them where they're going next. And I give them maybe like 6 options. And then I can have miniatures, terrain, or in the case of an online game that I run, I can have tokens and stuff ready for them. Okay. Johnny H says, when you play war games, do you build your army to win, min-max? If not, why? No, I do my games for fun. If I'm going to a tournament, I'll do the best I can. But let me tell you, I've been to very few tournaments. Back in the 90s, I went to, early 2000s, I went to a bunch of Rogue Trader tournaments, a ton of them, and never won anything except sportsmanship and painting, which is great. I'm not complaining about that. What is it? I went to a grand tournament in spring of 2004 when I first started Blue Table Painting, and won, I think it was called Player's Choice. It was basically like painting for an Autumn Wood Elves army that I had painted. And that was really good. I wish I had kept all those trophies. There was a point like 15 years later where I had this big box of trophies, and I was like, I literally just threw them in the garbage. Honey, come here.
Yes.
It's okay. Come here, baby. You be on the video.
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't want to be on it?
There's
Okay,
a
what do you
fly.
need?
There's a fly.
Oh, there's a fly? Well, you'll have to wait for that. I will come take care of it in a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, bye. All right. So the answer is I don't. I like to play for fun. My next round of Warhammer 40K, I'm simply going to look for opponents who just want a very casual game, and I just want to have fun and have it be even, and I don't want heavy hitters and this crazy stuff. And you know what? Games Workshop, they could have balanced it. They could have brought balance to the Force, but instead they joined the dark side. They want a game that's unbalanced so people will buy things and buy the new books and buy the new supplements. And so it's never going to stabilize. It's never going to be balanced. And that's just how it is. And it makes me very sad. But guess what? I could go play other games that are balanced. But am I doing it? No, I'm not. I'm playing a game by this company that I love and has really cool miniatures. And there's tons of players. It's a great thing about Games Workshop games is wherever you go, there's going to be people playing them. And it's hard to get that kind of what's that called? Critical mass. All right, let me see if I have other things going on here. Was Normandy invasion successor realistically at risk of failure? If so or not. I don't know anything about this. I was going to read up on that and give some kind of erudite answer. Wasn't worth it. What is the theme? Asks Chris M. I don't know what that means. Some Lorfa stuff. This is Alexander D. Some lore stuff, like how's G-Man going to react to the dwarves coming back? How do you think this is going to shake up the Imperium, maybe with the Mechanicus maybe? Okay, so G-Man is Robert Guillemin. I don't know how you say it. And dwarves is squats. So as you may know, many years ago, there's a lot of kid noise going on in the background. Many years ago, there was an army called the Squats. They were basically like space dwarves, but Games Workshop discontinued them. And notoriously, for decades, they basically said they were dead. They were never going to bring them back. But guess what? Now they're coming back through Necromunda, which I think is toe in the water. And my personal opinion is that the models are not great. I think they lost a great opportunity to have a really thematically and aesthetically strong army, but instead they have like these weird dome helmets, and I don't know. I'm not loving them. And this is coming from a guy who loves everything that comes out of Games Workshop. In fact, yeah, all right, confession. That's my problem. I love things in general. I like people. I don't see their bad sides. It's definitely a disadvantage in life that I sort of like, I see everything through rose-colored glasses. You know, it's like you have a crack addiction? Well, I'm sure you'll do great here in your recovery here at Blue Table Painting. And there's like an audible groan goes up from the staff like, Sean, no, don't see the good in people. All right, anyway. So in terms of the lore, I don't know enough about it. In terms of the actual game, do you need attention? What are you doing? I'll make you lunch. Just give me like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Or get your own lunch. It doesn't matter. You just don't got to be so noisy.
I don't have any food because I don't.
All right, here's the deal. Oh, so I have seen this post floating around that Games Workshop, in order for Warhammer 40K to hit the mainstream, they're going to have to ditch some of that old grimdark, which is not for popular consumption. And so they're going to split the game. Horus Heresy is still going to have all the grimdark stuff. And the mainstream 40K is going to be I don't know, this is me spit polishing something. It's going to be cleaned up basically for common consumption. Age of Sigmar already is like that, so tough call. Okay, KCC, well, I missed a lot of them. KCC asks about dry brushing do's and don'ts. Well, make sure you dry. Okay, dry brushing is much maligned. It's like, oh, this is like, oh, it's for beginners. It doesn't look good. Everything has to be like wet blended. Well, no, it doesn't. And dry brushing, like anything, can be done well or it can be done terribly. So my tip for dry brushing is deglopping. So have a piece of cardboard nearby and actually kind of stroke the brush on it with just a little bit of force to make sure that little chunks of paint aren't hiding out in the bristles. So those glops, as I call them, when you're dry brushing, they'll come out and they'll just come out in this big old streak of bleh. And that's where bad dry brushing happens. So clean your brush really well and modulate both the pressure of the brush and how much pigmentation you leave on it. And he has a lot of other things that would be the subject of like a zillion other things. Okay, and I think I got it. I think I covered every single topic except maybe a couple, and that I'm either ignoring or I'm going to handle in a different subject or a different email, a different video. God, what's wrong with me? All right, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Blue Table Painting is still going. I got an amazing crew. My crew is really strong right now. I'd love to do some quotes and be your go-to painting service. We're the workhorse painting service. We're here when you need us.